In this lesson, we are going to discuss integers, how we graph integers on number lines, and how we use integers to represent real situations. Positive whole numbers, their opposites and zero, are called integers. Notice we have no fractions when we're talking about integers. To represent data that are less than zero, you can use negative integers. A negative integer is written with a minus sign. So when we talk about -1, -2, -3, etc., we can also refer to that as -1, -2, -3. They really act as the same ideas. Data that are greater than 0 are represented by positive integers. And these are numbers that you have been using since you were just learning to count. +1, +2, +3, and so on. So on a number line, you'll see that we have negative integers that are always to the left of 0. Positive integers are always to the right. And 0 is included as an integer, but it is considered neither positive nor negative. Now I want to go back for a moment and talk about that term opposite. Numbers that are opposite are simply numbers that have the same distance from 0 but are in opposite directions on the number line. So for example, +2 has an opposite of -2. They're the same distance from 0, but they're lying in opposite directions. Now sometimes you'll see number lines that are drawn vertically. If you think about the coordinate plane, let me try that again. The y-axis is simply a vertical number line. We have 0 at the origin. Our positive numbers are above 0, and our negative numbers are below 0 on that y-axis. Let's look at some real situations that we can represent with integers. In the first example, we'll talk about a 10-yard loss in football. And this is a situation where a team, instead of advancing the football 10 yards, they actually go backward. They have a loss. Well, that's really not a good thing for the team with the ball. So we would consider that a negative. It's not a positive thing. It's negative. So a 10-yard loss can be represented with the integer of -10. Our reference point would be 0, where the team neither gains yards nor loses yards. They make a play, but they don't lose or gain. In example 2, when we talk about rain, normal rainfall can be used as our reference, as our 0 point. 4 inches of rain above normal would be represented with the integer of +4. We're 4 inches above. And again, that y-axis might be a good frame of reference for you to use. In the third example, a deposit of $48 into a savings account is a good thing. That means you've earned some money or you've been given some money, which was really nice. And that would be represented with a +48. Okay, positive is good, negative is not so good. Let's look at some other situations that can be represented with integers. If Tina receives $100 for her birthday, well, that's definitely a positive. That's a good thing. That is a gain for Tina. So that's a +100, a +100. If Sarah owes her parents $30, that means that she didn't have $30 that she actually spent. So she's in debt. So when somebody talks about a debt, that's a negative. So Sarah is in debt $30, or she has a -30 balance. If Ken drops his glasses in the water at the pool and they land 15 feet underwater, we would use the surface of the water as our 0, as our reference. And Ken's glasses would now be at a -15, 15 feet below the surface of the water. A temperature that is 80 degrees, if you do not hear a meteorologist say that that is below 0, then you assume the positive. So this would be a +80 degrees, whereas a temperature of 6 degrees below 0 would be represented with a -6. When we are graphing integers on the number line, the sign of the number simply tells us the direction from 0. the number tells us the distance. So if we're talking about -7, negative tells us that we're going to start at 0 and then move left, where 7 tells us we're going to move 7 units. In our next examples, we will do some graphing of some values given. So our first number line, on our first number line, we need to graph -3, so we're going to start at 0. Negative says move left. 3 tells us to move 3 units. If we're asked to graph 0, then we just mark the point where we start. -2, again, negative tells us to move left. 2 tells us to move 2 units. And that 4, unless you see the sign, you assume positive. So that 4 means +4. So we'll start at 0 and we'll move right 4. On our second number line, we're starting with an 8. And since you do not see a sign, you assume that is a +8. So we'll start at 0 and move right 8 units. -6 means start at 0, move left 6 units. -9 means start at 0, move left 9. And 5 means +5, so we'll start at 0, and this time we're moving right 5 units. So again, if you don't see a sign in front of a number, mathematicians assume that that is a positive value. In this picture, we have a bar graph that shows the amount of money remaining in clothing budgets of 4 students at the end of 1 month. A value of -$2 simply means that someone has overspent their budget and that they owe his or her parents $2. In the first question, we're asked to consider what number represents owing $8. Now, owing means you've overspent. You've spent all the money in your wallet and an additional $8, which means you owe somebody $8. So owing means, owing means that you are in debt. So you have a balance of -$8. Whereas a number that represents having $5 left means that you spent your own money and you still have $5 in your wallet. So that's a +5. And again, we don't always write that plus in front of our integers. We assume that positive is there if we don't see a sign. In our last examples, we're going to look at graphing integers on a thermometer. And again, this is kind of like that that y-axis on the coordinate plane. It's just simply a vertical number line. So 20 degrees is considered a +20 degrees. So we'll start at 0. Positive means we're moving up. So we're moving up 10, 20, and we're going to draw a line right there at 20 degrees. And if you want to color that in, you're welcome to do so, but we always color in below the marking that we're asked to make. In the second example, we're asked to mark 32 degrees. Now, so we can start at 0. We're going to count positive 10, 20, 30, and we have to be careful here because there are not 10 marks between 30 and 40. There are only 5 spaces. That means we're counting by 2s. So that first mark is not 31 but 32. Okay, be very careful in the direction that you travel when you're marking on these thermometers. In the third example, we're asked to mark -10 degrees. That's 10 degrees below our reference point, below 0. So now, instead of moving up, we're moving down. We're moving below. So down to that -10. We're going to make our mark, color in. And then in the final example, we're at -8 degrees. So we're at 0, and negative means move below. We don't travel quite to that -10. Every line is 2 degrees, so -2, 4, 6, 8 is right here just above that -10 mark. And again, shade in everything below that mark. All right, as you wind up the video lesson for today, make sure you've taken good notes on your notes page. Remember to answer the WSQ at the end of this video, and we will continue our discussions together in class. Thank you.